top of the agenda here. First thing on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone in the audience today who would like to provide comments, or have we received any public comment?
We did not receive any comments in advance, and I'm looking in the attendees and I don't see any members of the public that are online right now.
Okay. We will move on then. Next on the agenda is introductions, roll call. Stephen, you want to go ahead and take roll call?
I'll do that. And if I could, just really quickly, a little housekeeping here. Wanted to just confirm, I see Councilor Falconer online. I wanted to see if you're sitting in today for Mayor Wenzel. Okay, we'll come back. All right, I'll go ahead and go in alphabetical order by jurisdiction as we usually do. City of Banks, Mayor Kirk.
Here.
Thank you. City of Beaverton, Mayor Beatty. Don't think I've seen her yet. Keep an eye out for. Sorry, I'm trying to. Let's see. So Cornelius, Mayor Delane.
Present.
Thank you, sir. For Durham, Mayor Drake. Keep an eye out for him. For Forest Grove, I see Councilor Falconer. Are you going to be sitting in today?
I am here. I apologize. I had to go grab a dog who was barking.
No worries. We will promote you to a panelist.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And let's see. For Hillsborough, Mayor Pace. I see you there. Thank you. For King City, Mayor Manelis.
Present.
Thank you. For North Plains, do we have Mayor Goodwin or Councilor Figgy? Okay, keep an eye out. For Sherwood, Mayor Rosner. Saw you, of course.
I'm here.
City of Tigard, Mayor Lube.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. For Tualatin, Mayor Bubenik.
Present.
Thank you. For Wilsonville, Mayor O'Neill.
Present.
Thank you. And we know we have Commissioner Fye on for Washington County. For our non-voting representatives, I saw Councilor Rosenthal. I think you're with us.
Yes.
Thank you. For ODOT, we have Stephanie Turner.
Yep, here.
Thank you. Port of Portland, Dan Eisenbeis.
Here.
Thank you. And for TriMet, John Sarah, it looks like.
Present. Thank you, Stephen.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. And has anyone joined while I was going through the roll call? I think. Okay.
I don't think
we're good, sir.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you very much, Stephen. We got two items on action items today. First is consideration of the WCCC meeting summary for January 13th. I'll entertain a motion, or if anyone has any Scribner errors or changes they'd like to suggest, that too.
I make the motion to approve the minutes. Mayor Pace.
I second it. Mayor O'Neill.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 And all those opposed, say aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next on the action items, TDT expenditures. I did ask in our prep meeting last week, since we have a lot of new mayors and they may be unfamiliar with this, I just asked staff to just spend a little bit of time walking through what this is and what the process is and why we do this. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm actually going to turn to Dyami Valentine. I think may give us our quick TDT overview. Is that right, Dyami?
Good morning. Thanks, Stephen. Or afternoon. Sorry. Dyami Valentine, Principal Transportation Planner, and we did add a presentation. If you want me to walk through it at this time, I'm happy to do so. If Teresa can pull it up,
That would
or
be
or I can share, whichever is preferred. Let me see.
Give me just a minute
Okay, thanks.
and I'll pull it up.
We also have time allotted later, so I know that I think you have some presenters that are maybe time constrained, so we could just take action on the expenditure request now if that's easy as well.
How long is it gonna take you to run through the presentation?
5 to 7 minutes, probably.
And which of our presenters are time constrained?
We've got our legislative update team. Which is item 4A.
Well, why don't we do this, and why don't we just jump right to A, then we'll come back to that presentation and approving the expenditures on TDT. That works for everybody. All right. I'm sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that will work. And I'm trying to, Teresa, if you are able, I'm trying to promote our AOC and LOC folks to panelists, but I'm not able to do that.
Was anyone able to see my screen just now? With
Yes.
the sharing?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
We'll do the
Let's see.
TDT right after item A.
Okay.
See Jim, and do I see Brian? I do. All right. Well, I want to introduce Brian Worley and from the Association of Oregon Counties and Jim McCauley from the League of Oregon Cities. They're going to do a brief overview of the State Legislative Joint Committee on Transportation Workgroups and a preview of the 2025 State Legislative session. Who wants to go first, Brian or Jim?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, a couple slides here. I was going to hopefully try to present them here if I can. But thank you for having us today. My name is Brian Worley. I'm the Association of Oregon Counties County Road Program Director. And I'm joined by Jim McCauley, League of Oregon Cities Legislative Director. And we were going to give you a legislative update, particularly focused on the transportation package, which you likely all have been hearing about for a long time now, with the committees going on and tour across the state last year and work groups through the interim of this fall, and now session beginning just a few weeks ago. Here. You see my slides? Hold on a second.
Yes, we can see your slides.
There we go. Okay. All right. So, and please stop us along the way if you have questions. We'll hold questions at the end too, about what's going on. We are early in session, so certainly a lot more to come and on that. But I was going to give you a quick state highway fund revenue overview. I'm sure you're all pretty aware of this and how we got to where we're at with the package and the state revenue needs on our transportation system. And then just primarily talk about the Joint Committee on Transportation work groups and what's coming up with the Joint Committee on Transportation, and just highlight a few other transportation bills we've been tracking. And then I think Jim was going to give you a few updates on the city sides as well. So State Highway Fund, as you know, we had our last gas tax increase with HB 2017 that was passed in 2017, just last year, the 2-cent increase. So you can see kind of on that State Highway Fund projections there on the left, and it really becomes flat rates in the coming years, but particularly on fuels taxes, those are predicted to, without any increases or adjustments, will be decreasing in the near term into the future because of the adoptions of EV and higher mileage vehicles and more fuel efficient vehicles. Some of those losses, as far as why the state highway is flat, is just increases in motor carrier and DMV fees that make up some of that without taking any further action. But along with ODOT and counties and cities, primarily, as you sure are all very aware, state highway fund and transportation particularly has been impacted by inflation in recent years, the construction industry. And that's really a lot of transportation projects, and that's ODOT, counties, and cities together. And that has precipitated a pretty large ODOT deficit at what they predicted last year was 1.8 billion annually. And counties and cities have also produced pretty significant reports around needs in the transportation system as well. What was included in the governor's recommendation budget on a biennial basis was a little bit less than that, I believe at 1.7 annually billion. So the legislature has, and working with ODOT and counties and cities, looking at potential revenue raising options and a new transportation package at the state level. There were tours across the state last year that AOC and LOC engaged in quite heavily, and then all regionally with counties and cities. I believe your region had that one of those last tour dates in Hillsborough towards the end of September. But since then, the Joint Committee on Transportation held work groups that counties and cities participated in with many other stakeholders from environmental communities, business, trucking, many different areas. Over 40 plus individuals in each one of these work groups that were focused on these three areas: back to basics, maintenance preservation, public and active transit, and finishing 2017 priority commitments. I have a couple more slides for you just to show you what came out of these reports. These links to these reports also are in these slide deck if you need to find them. They were finished up and posted online just a few weeks ago for the Joint Committee on Transportation as they were entering into the legislative session. These work group reports will likely be used as a framework for the transportation package. We have been told that a transportation package using that outline will be released by February 14th. So end of this week. We're expecting to hear a lot more about exactly what that framework looks like. What level of detail will be included in there might still be lacking, but I guess until we see that report of the joint committee, we'll see. We're expected to have a bill on this transportation package in mid-April. So quite a bit of public hearings and all the other bills in session having hearings probably through that February to March timeline leading up to that and outlining the actual bill getting released. The Joint Committee on Transportation is currently meeting on Mondays and Tuesdays from 5 to 6:30. So quickly on some of these reports, and I'm just going to highlight some of the big picture highlights that primarily came out of back to basics maintenance preservation. This is probably the core report and area that affects counties and city budgets as far as just your operations and maintenance, your preservation, the 50-30-20, the state highway fund. So one of the survey results that came out of that group, and what I'm showing you here is short-term funding options, and these are primarily the funding options those work groups looked at to that are in the existing state highway fund. And these green, yellow, red survey results are basically all the stakeholders on a kind of general survey of how the group is feeling about these different revenue options. As you can see on these existing revenue options, they're all fairly similar as far as how those results came back. Obviously, increasing fuels tax being kind of higher end, the largest and traditional area that state highway fund has relied on for sources. But one of the other ones I want to highlight particularly for you is enhanced passenger registration fees. As you might know, with the EVs and the higher mileage vehicles, this is an area that the state, both with looking at VMT and road usage charges, but also just making up those differences on those tiered system of enhanced vehicle registration fees. This was first created in HB 2017 in the last package, and there's likely going to be a lot of discussion around raising these tiers again. Even since HB 2017 passed, those higher miles EV vehicles are not making up the same amount of money as their counterparts for the wear and tear on the roads with the current rates. So we'll likely see a strong evaluation of that in any package that we see this year. Where some of the larger discussions might occur are in long-term funding options and new revenue. These are the survey results that came out of that. A little more variables on some of these new taxes. You can see that the carbon tax was on the lower end as far as having this as part of the package and what that means for transportation. Fuel and tax indexing, quite high. Counties and cities and transportation agencies have always advocated pretty heavily for fuel tax indexing. I mean, as you know, to keep up with inflation, that's important. There's many other states that are already doing this as well. So I think that's something Oregon will take a hard look at. But yeah, let me just cover briefly a couple of these things. So yeah, the road usage charge program, or VMTs, Orgo. Certainly, I think the legislature is looking at taking some short-term transition steps to move to a program long-term. But the legislature actually including a mandatory VMT program this session is probably low, but it'll certainly have presentations and part of the conversation. And certainly is an area that the state of Oregon has been studying and researching and has had the first volunteer program in the country to take a hard look at a mandatory program. Like I mentioned, fuel tax indexing is very significant, and with the recent inflation, I think the need for it has been highlighted even more. There's potential a lot of balancing revenue in the state highway fund moving forward if this was to occur. Many other states have already done this. And I think we've seen a lot more support within the legislature and stakeholders for Oregon potentially finally taking this on. Just quickly show you the impact of indexing. This ODOT chart that was created late last year just shows you kind of where gas taxes would be at if we did index. We're currently at 40 cents, that's at the bottom. If it would be at 55 cents if indexing had occurred, I believe, what does it say in the before the last couple basically transportation packages. So that top line one is actually if we had both indexing and the last job and the Transportation Act was in 2009 and HB 2017, we'd be at 75 cents. It is significant, the loss to inflation. And I think this really highlights the power of indexing. And then one of the last ones here I had for you, vehicle purchase and ownership tax, or you could call it a sales tax on vehicles. Oregon is one of the few states in the West Coast or really nationwide that does not have, and because traditionally we don't have sales tax on many goods, we do not have sales taxes on new and used vehicles. This is likely something the legislature will look at. They've looked at it in the past. I think the biggest highlight for all of you is why we fall behind in transportation revenue compared to particularly Washington, the state of California, is because of this tax. You can see that combined annual and only a 1% sales tax is 220 to 260 million in investment into the state highway fund. When compared to that, the revenue sources and revenue raising options, this is certainly a place where Oregon is lagging behind when it comes to transportation revenue. But traditionally, Oregonians are not favorable in sales tax, even on our vehicles, and how this fits into our current vehicle privilege tax, which is very similar to this, but kind of placed on a different place. It actually falls outside of the constitutional state highway fund restrictions as well. So something the legislature should be looking at. I believe this is the last new revenue option I was going to highlight for you. So the retail delivery fees, this has been a significant part of conversation, even through some of the roadshow tour last summer and into the fall. This was highlighted. There's only been 2 states that have really taken this on as a statewide initiative. So this is to make up for all those new medium to shorter trips, Amazon deliveries, those types of things, and really making a flat delivery fee type system that allows those fundings. I will highlight for all you as local governments is that the retail fee delivery fee that was passed by Minnesota actually almost entirely goes to local governments in that state. So this is very much a local government revenue raising tool. Collecting at the state level comes along with a lot of administrative benefits. Certainly, if cities and counties were to implement this on their own and not having sales tax already, there's a lot of administrative challenges here. So that generally covers kind of my high level overview of the discussions around revenue. Now, and I didn't highlight everything there. So when we see the framework come out here in a week or two, we're hoping to get some better ideas and direction on what the legislature is starting to develop and really what the full universe is of those revenue raising tools. But just wanted to highlight just some other few bills as well. These are ones your county road and AOC have been tracking, particularly Senate Bill 687, that is removing the local fuels and VRF fees requirement to go to the voters. You can still send to voters. That VRF one is a 350,000 population, so the 3 metro counties already have those local vehicle registration fees in place and didn't need to go to the voters automatically to do that. The gas tax aspect is much likely a harder lift of removing those requirements. Cities in particular have a lot more gas taxes, although I know what Washington County's rates at 2 cents or something like that. HB 2154, County Road Safety Corridors. This is just a local bill that we've been working on at AOC for rural roads that allows for double fines. We're looking to turn that into a permanent program. The chair of that work group is actually Stacy Shetler, the county engineer from Washington County. So Washington County's been pretty involved in that pilot program to date that we would like to make permanent. Abandoned RV funds has been an issue multiple sessions in a row, looking at raising RV fees to provide a fund for ODOT counties and cities to clean up abandoned hazardous RVs in the right of way and parks. HB 3119, Advanced Clean Trucks Rule. This is actually a delay bill. This was getting a lot of hearings and early on in session. Some of the implementation issues around Daimler trucks in the early part of the year has been a big highlight as far as advancing some of those trucks and availability of those EV and clean larger vehicles. The highway cost allocation imbalance. There's no bill on this one yet, but we're expecting that new report to come out, I believe, next week. And if you've been following this, this is required under the Constitution, report done every 2 years of the imbalance between heavy trucks and light vehicles and paying their fair share. Trucks have been overpaying by over 30% in this last biennium, and that's likely to come back in the same report at that same level. So under the Constitution required to have that equity balance between those payers of the system. So this will be a huge part of how this package comes together and discussions going there. State Highway Fund, ODOT efficiency and accountability reporting. I don't believe there's any bills yet, but that is something your LOC and AOC team will be tracking closely. So you might remember there was some new condition reporting requirements that came out of HB 2017 for counties and cities that are relatively easy to comply with and make sure we have the accountability. But a lot of issues around ODOT's efficiency and these deficits, and particularly of what the legislature requires of them, and then how that is also applied to counties and cities is something we're going to need to monitor through the end of session. And then didn't list any bills here at the bottom too, but generally this is a lot of other issues going around about environmental permitting, contracting, prevailing wage, and particularly the project labor agreements with the governor's executive order signing around the holidays. These issues will be part of just the general transportation policy, but also related to the package as well that your AOC and LOC team will be monitoring. So with that, I was going to hand it over to Jim to kind of wrap us up on comments and happy to take questions as well. Jim?
Yeah, thanks very much, Brian. If you could flip it back to that last slide, that would be super. It's helpful for the backdrop. So I think my role, at least conversation-wise today, is to try to think about, basically next steps forward, pathway to completing a transportation package for this session. So there's a couple of things. I'll start really with these policy items that Brian highlighted here. And the ones that I'm going to kind of select from really begin with the Advanced Clean Truck Rule, the HCAS imbalance, as well as the PLA. I think those three items are going to be driving some of the connected policy conversations over the scale of what this transportation package is going to look like before we get out of this session. They being the committee has already had a conversation over the Clean Trucks Rule, and pretty interesting presentation from the various panelists there with the difficulty with the industry being able to meet some of the standards, specifically on the electrical side of this thing. So when you look at some of the large trucks that are out there trying to convert those fleets, Oregon literally has one EV station in the entire state to try to accommodate a rule that would dramatically expand requirements for those larger trucks and things of that nature. There's also obviously a manufacturing component here with the inability to meet some of that, not some, but the vast majority of those requirements over time. And again, with some of the other options that are out there for fleets. So that definitely had an interesting conversation again in front of the committee, and it's there, I think, to try to stake out some of those policy conversations on what this transportation package is going to look like. I think the HCAS piece too, even though the Trucking Association lost their legal challenge of this thing, may still be part of the conversation here over the next several months, trying to figure out how that imbalance is going to get fixed long term. I can't imagine trucking interests are going to let that one go away or step aside from that conversation. And again, I think this project labor agreement that was dropped right before Christmas that I think had both Brian's members and my members pretty concerned because of the language. The executive order itself hasn't been cleaned up, but there has been some clarifying messaging coming out of the governor's office and out of some of the agencies is that PLA is only going to be applied to state-owned facilities. So any money that goes through the system to local governments is not going to be part of that PLA agreement going forward. So I think those three elements will be part of the conversation. If you move up to the Senate Bill 687, it's kind of interesting with Senator Pham, who dropped this bill. This came up in a couple of different locations during their tour. Essentially, they were pushing it out, they being the committee, looking for opportunities, looking for some alternatives out there to generate revenue and trying to leverage some of that local government funding that might be available with this type of a mechanism. So as Brian mentioned, you've got 3 counties out there that have got a local gas tax. You've got 19 or 20 cities roughly that have got a gas tax in place. Obviously, a substantial amount of room to increase that, but the policy of essentially making it permissive to have to go out for a vote will definitely get quite a bit of, I'll just say, debate in front of the committee. Anytime, we face, I'll say, as cities, a preemption on some of our local, our decision making, we object to it. And I think because of how we look at home rule and things of that nature and its application that's out there, limiting a constituent base from being able to vote on a revenue choice like this in terms of a gas tax potentially brings up some, I'll just say, debate or local challenges if the jurisdiction wants to do that. I think for some, it wouldn't be a problem, but I think when you start applying this to several cities across the state that don't have something like that, I think cities would be pretty hard pressed to try to institute by ordinance a gas tax without some type of significant involvement from the public, whether that's a vote or some type of budgetary type of conversation. So we'll see how that one goes. But bottom line, I don't think 687 is going to go anywhere unless it's part of the overall transportation package. I think that's pretty realistic in this process. I think once we see what the framework looks like here on the 14th, we're going to get a better sense on maybe the scale, how big this transportation package is going to be. I think there is a range of where it could fall. I'll say at the top end, there's been a couple of voices out there talking about 5.3 billion, which would match the 2017 transportation package in totality. You've got others that are closer to the billion, maybe 2 billion type of range, which would barely cover Department of Transportation's needs that are out there. So my sense is probably somewhere in between is where this is going to scale. And I think because of the reason for identifying some of these other revenue options were out there is so that we don't solely rely on the gas tax as an example for paying for transportation funding over the long term. So right now, it's going to be, we knew going into this session, it was going to be a tough go to try to get the votes. Even though Democrats have got a super majority, they're going to want to make this bipartisan. But you can already hear objections to any type of tax increase that's out there. So there's going to be a lot of conversation going on between now and the late parts of this session before we physically get this thing through a committee process. And for anybody who was involved back in that 2017 effort, that was 3 years worth of work bringing it into the session. And the vast majority of the work that was done on that bill didn't really take place until literally the last 30 days of the session. Final framework of that really didn't get set until literally end of April, first part of May, and rolling into the final 2 weeks of the session. That bill was actually 2017 was over $7 billion. So it had been trimmed down pretty substantially and stuff before it physically moved out of committees and moved into the floor for votes. So pretty interesting outlook for us. A lot of pitfalls, a lot of challenges, obviously, to try to come up with the revenue that they're going to need for this. And we'll all be very curious to see what they end up selecting out of the end. So that's mine. Happy to take any questions here before we step away.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Brian. Great presentation. I appreciate it. And I was about to ask if there's any questions, and I already see one from Mayor Delenn. Go ahead.
Jim, Brian, thank you for your presentation. Good info. Yeah, I share the concerns with SB 687, right? I mean, if we can't sell the idea that we need a gas tax to the local constituency and have them do it, that's a pretty onerous one to ask unless they're going to do it. And the counterpoint to that, I would say, and Jim, you're always good at letting me know if this sounds silly or not, is if they gave it at the state level to everybody and said, hey, every city gets 2 cents, every county gets 2 cents, and it's just we're putting in a new statewide, and we were smart enough to make it indexing to begin with. I don't know if you think something, if they're willing to go that far on doing something more with gas tax. And then I think the other one I had a question about is if they are moving forward on the idea of maybe road usage, have Representative McLean's idea about making it part of the income tax where they can, abate it for those that are on the low end. Is that getting any traction? And would the road usage fee be in addition to gas tax or instead of? So that's the couple of questions, and then the one comment on 687.
Brian, I can take a first shot and tell me if I missed anything. And Mayor, thanks for the question. So I'll start with maybe the road user fee. The idea with that is a replacement, not in addition to. So if you were signed into the program like Orgo right now, that's how you're paying your effective rate on gas tax, or on what the equivalent would be on the gas tax. And that's the same kind of concept going forward as anybody who goes into that system. If they make it mandated for EVs as an example, that's where that revenue coverage would be coming from. Obviously, it wouldn't be paying a gas tax out of that structure. So that's the concept. I think, when you look at something that's maybe more of a broad-based concept of having every city gets, 2 cents type of structure, that's an interesting way to deal with it. I think there's a way to sell it. Certainly is for value. I think any of the cities or the counties that have got either that gas tax or share in some of that gap for registration fees, that's a substantial chunk of money that comes out that helps pay for and helps leverage other funding coming into the system. If you dial this back to House Bill 2017 and the 2017 session, the reason why that bill initially, I'll just say, came into the process with a $7 billion number is because there was a metro region bump for both gas tax and registration fees that made up that additional funding, with the concept being that it needed to be there because the scale of the projects that were coming into the system needed to be, I'll just say, had a little bit more leverage locally with some additional funds. So, but yeah, it's that's going to be a challenge to structure something like that on the gas tax that doesn't hit cities or counties and stuff for avoiding a local vote.
And I'd say the last one, I'm sure we'll get support from my counterparts here. Can't wipe out what we've already got. Like we have a local gas tax.
Yeah.
You can't, if they go to something this road user, they got to keep us whole because we're just making do now. So I think that's one of the big things I'd ask for is if we've got something, we need to be able to hold on to that, not lose ground in whatever compromise they make. Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely been part of our pitch throughout this whole process is if you are going to go transition, in which we as an organization have been fully supportive, you can't negatively impact that collection at the local level for those cities who've got gas taxes in place. And there's certainly the technology to be able to do it.
Thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you.
And Mayor, yeah, I'll add one more comment on SB
Sure.
687. It's certainly both LOC and AOC's opinion that, more tools in the toolbox locally is needed, but we're making it very clear that a bill like this and those tools do not replace the State Highway Fund 50-30-20 share and our need for shared revenue at the state level. So we're making that very clear. Senator Pham in particular, who's introduced this bill, understands that well and has that same position, that she knows that importance of that local State Highway Fund share and supporting local governments through that, and not maybe smaller issues like this. So thanks for the questions.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Fye.
Thank you, Chair. Brian and Jim, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and very well put together presentation. I really enjoyed this information. One question from our staff is, in your opinions and what you're hearing in Salem, which of these options, funding options, will actually most likely end up in the final package or the draft package? That's one question. And then from my own edification, a question I have is the first bill. And that is, I appreciate what you said, Brian, around counties and counties' opinions. I'm concerned about if you're hearing from especially the 35 counties AOC represents, if you're hearing any concerns or comments or feedback around the reduction of voter control of this bill. And then the other thing is, the accountability concerns around what this could mean, that we could impact residents without a direct mandate from them, and what this means for those 2 points. And then in general, these options, where does the information disseminations about any of these funding options, which would really impact everyone across the board and in terms of their own money piece, where does the information or education campaign lies around this? Where's the responsibility to educate residents about these funding options, and what it could mean to their own income and how this impacts them? Because I really enjoy this presentation, and I'll definitely share with the board, and then also try to facilitate a conversation of our board where we are in any of these. But I'm concerned that the rest of the community isn't aware what's about to come.
Yeah, Commissioner Pai, that's exactly right. I think the vast majority of the public is pretty unaware of transportation fees and taxes. I mean, one of the benefits of the gas tax is it one of those hidden taxes that we've benefited for many years, but moving to these other systems are much more apparent when you get those large bills, say your registration fees, that I think that's much more clear to the payer than the gas tax. So yeah, a lot of issues around this. First, educating on that. I mean, certainly ODOT has op-eds and certain educational, and there's a lot more news stories that have been related to these topics. But I think locally it's important too. And last fall, we released the county roads needs study. We've gotten a little bit of traction in some media. Some counties have been able to share those stories locally of bridges, for example, like Multnomah County had to shut down the Stark Street Bridge on the east side. So they've been linking some of those educational opportunities, that trying to inform the public, not only about the gas tax and what you're paying for on the large projects and the I-5 bridge and the Rose Quarter, all these big ticket things we hear about, but that these matter to your county streets, your local roads, and what you're paying for, and how that relates. So it's not an easy topic to educate the public on, but there's a lot of folks trying, and certainly we have some resources at AOC that we can help you with and connect the dots there. Washington County has certainly your own avenues of educating the public as well. And then I'll see if I can get to your other two questions here as well. So I'd say statewide, actually the support on more local control on SB 687 is pretty strong, particularly on vehicle registration fees that has that 350,000 population. So Washington, Multnomah, Clackamas counties all have that authority already. So does Lane. Although the last time they tried this, they did send it to the voters and it failed quite miserably. I'd say generally there's pretty good support around this. I don't know if most county commissioners see that as removing local control. They see it as gaining a tool that's similar to what the metro counties already have. So we have some more rural county commissioners that are, I think, fairly smart. That's not to say that the way this looks for the voters and removing voter sentiment is not a difficult thing to have, and how it gets spinned in certain areas. OPB article earlier last week on SB 687 I would say was not good for the PR around this particular issue, if you happen to catch that article. And then finally, I think your last question, or your first question that I'm getting back to, is which ones of these options are highest on the list or most likely? I think the legislature is primarily going to be looking at those traditional, raising the gas tax. I think from local government's perspective, and a lot of people, indexing either gas taxes or vehicle registration fees would be really high. And then I highlighted that earlier to you as well, the tiered system on vehicle registration fees. So the higher fees on the EVs and the higher mileage is likely to occur, I think, as well. And then those last two items that I highlighted when I was going through the slides. So the delivery fees and the sales taxes on the vehicles. Those are probably the most challenging new revenue sources. They potentially can raise a lot of new revenue as well. So I think that's really the universe we're looking at. But until we can see the framework in the next couple months of really what's coming out and within the bill, I don't think we'll know for sure. But I think that's generally what we're seeing right now as far as this package coming together. Did I get to everything, Commissioner? In your questions?
Very well, yes.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add one. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Jim. Please add on. I was going to say there are a lot of heavy hitter mayors here, so I was trying to this focus on the county, but you please add.
The one thing I think it's important for everybody to understand on this educational piece is it falls on all of us, honestly, with some of the communication with our own constituent base. I think the 13 roadshow stops that we had were helpful. It wasn't like there were 200 or 300 people that were attending them. But I think the folks who were there were pretty well informed. They understood that there's a sizable gap. There's a need out there for continued transportation investment. And I think when you break it down to the nuts and bolts of what the average driver pays in the state to try to keep up transportation facilities, I mean, we're talking $300. I suspect that the vast majority of us on this call are paying that on a monthly basis with your streaming costs for TV or with your phones and things of that nature. So $300 is a heck of a bargain in the scheme of things when you look at transportation infrastructure that has to be kept up. But ultimately, that education falls on all of us.
Sorry, Councilor Rosenthal.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Rossner. Although if there's other city mayors that want to go first, I'd prefer to take the end of the line.
I think I'm gonna just take these last three questions because I do want to make sure we keep moving forward, but go ahead.
All right, two quick questions. I noticed, and is it clear that congestion pricing, sometimes called tolling, is completely off the table for the metropolitan area? That's one question. And also, I appreciate the presentation, and I'm glad that AOC and LOC are taking this very seriously and paying a lot of attention. And the other question is, and I guess we won't know until Friday, is whether the annual need for transportation is on the order of $6.5 billion. Are they going to be presenting a fragmented approach, or are they going to be presenting scenarios that would actually get us close to that revenue stream in the medium and long term?
I can go ahead and start and fill in, Brian. Tolling conversation, you still hear conversation about it. Realistically, probably not going to be part of the package at this point, unless there's some type of connectivity with Interstate Bridge Project. That clearly is still going to be a tolled project. Washington State has been doing it for years, well, obviously paying for their system, got approval for it, and that one has still not been taken off the board. So I wouldn't be surprised to still have the conversation, but whether or not it actually ends up in a bill, pretty unlikely. I think to your latter question, I don't think we're going to see the details of substance on framework. I think we're going to see more of a scope in terms of what the intent is that we're going to be trying to pay for, and maybe at the very edge is some estimate on type of a project cost or project scale. And that's really about it. I think we're going to get into the details of some of the questions that you asked. I think that's going to take place over the course of the session.
Thank you.
Great. Mayor O'Neill.
Thank you. Brian and Jim, I appreciate your presentation. This may have been addressed, but I didn't hear it. The road usage fees or that proposal, how is that going to, I'm trying to get an understanding if they're talking about adjusting it for people that are low wage earners. Because we in Wilsonville have about 82% of people that leave here, commute elsewhere. And we have some very economically challenging circumstances for at least, I think, 30% of our people just trying to pay rent. So just curious if they're looking at that.
I don't know if it's so much a conversation about whether or not there's going to be a break for low income, because there isn't one currently for gas tax. So anybody who's driving, people in Eastern Oregon, people in rural areas that are, maybe they're not 10,000 miles a year, maybe it's closer to 15, maybe it's 20. There's really no break in current structure for paying for. And again, the road user fee structure here is to effectively replace the gas tax. It's not in addition to. So, if you were looking at what they have currently at 2 cents a mile, you drive 10,000 miles a year, that's $200 effectively would be your equivalent on what gas tax would be for at again at that rate of 2 cents. So I think the only place that they've really talked about some type of a margin for lower income folks would be in a tolling type of structure, and that was part of some of those conversations that were taking place before Oregon stepped away from that for the I-205 projects and Abernathy. So Brian, I don't know if you've got anything else.
I think that covers it, Jim. No, the current road usage charge VMT conversations around that program and when it gets made mandatory is supposed to be equivalent to the gas tax and replace it and not. So not and like Jim said, there's no current low income variable that I will point out there is a lot of part of the road use because it heavily impacts EVs and electric vehicles. There's a lot of talk about how we balance those incentives and incentives for buying EVs and how those balance out, and certainly making EVs cheaper and more affordable for low income and lower residents is certainly part of the conversations, but nothing really coming up in the rates that I've seen discussed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Kirk.
Yes, kind of going off of the gas tax, has anybody thought seriously of maybe having a taxation on the charging stations?
Yeah, I mean, that's been definitely part of the conversation. The technology is certainly there. I'm an EV owner, so probably 98% of my charging takes place at home. And again, I think that's why they need to convert to a road user fee structure for at least EVs, and then to deal with anybody from out of state who's coming here to charge. That's been certainly part of the conversation. Again, technology is fully capable of doing it.
Yeah, obviously you're paying, if you're charging at home, then you're kind of already getting soaked, but the charging station themselves, especially I got 4 of them in banks, little banks here.
Right.
Let's see what we can glean off of it. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, Mayor, that's come up a lot in those discussions, and I think that comment you just made about the at-home charging is where the vast majority of so certainly charging at the public stations would not result in the same as a gas tax, right? It certainly can replace it without coming up with the charging, but I think a lot of particularly local jurisdictions have looked at adding on those local taxes to those EV charging, but certainly be talked about the state as well.
Well, great. Well, hey, Jim and Brian, thank you so much for coming today and presenting super helpful information. And I'm sure we'll probably be hearing from you again before the end of this long session. So thanks again.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. We'll get back to, we have 2 TDT projects and the TDT Rate Index Adjustment. So I'm going to turn it back over to Diane. I'm going to get your name wrong for a while here. I apologize.
Right. Dyami. Yep.
Dyami. Okay. I'm going to work on that. Anyways, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Chair. So Dyami Valentine, Principal Transportation Planner, and appreciate the request to share a little bit of an overview on the Transportation Development Tax. So I'm just going to walk through a quick presentation here covering kind of the 2 items that we have before you, the annual rate adjustment, as well as a couple expenditure requests. So go to the next slide, please. So quick overview here on the presentation. So just a little background, share kind of the oversight and implementation roles delegated to the WCCC, and then the more specifics on the expenditure requests and annual rate increases. All right, next slide, please. So this, the Transportation Development Tax was actually preceded by a traffic impact fee, which was initially established in 1985 that was applied to unincorporated Washington County only. And this preceded actually the statewide system development charge rules. And then was, because of its success as a funding mechanism to help address transportation impacts resulting from new development, was voter approved countywide, with over 70% in favor, so a favorable approach here, and was applied countywide in 1990. This was effective for over 24 years, and then the transportation development tax conversation ramped up, recognizing that we needed to kind of replace the TIF program, revise the rate structure, and increase the fees, and then also updated the rules to be consistent with the statewide system development charges. And this was the benefit of the transportation development tax. It's a uniform countywide system development charge. It is based on traffic, vehicle trips, so trips generated impacting our system. And it funds capacity improvements, which are specifically reflected in the approved transportation development tax project list. And so I'll walk through, and on the next slide, we illustrate here, and I think you've seen a slide that Stephen's kind of walked through before in terms of what the WCCC's role is, and I'll walk through a little more detail in slides here later. But our transportation, the WCCC TAC takes and provides recommendations to propose project list amendments. They also review request for expenditure requests compliance, and reviews the annual rate adjustments, and then provides those recommendations to your committee, which ultimately takes action and approves the expenditure requests, and then also provides recommendations to the board of county commissioners on project list amendments. And although not in action, the rate adjustments, you review those rate adjustments annually. And then the board has the responsibility for actually they refer the measure, obviously adopting the countywide ordinance, and then considers and acts on the project list amendments. Thank you. So a little bit more detail in terms of the implementation. So cities, agencies, staff provide, and Washington County on behalf of the unincorporated areas, so areas within your geography, your area of responsibilities, collect and manage your TDT funds, which are primarily collected at the time of building permit issuance. Also provide proposed amendments to the TDT project list, and then also submits expenditure requests. And then the county, through our county TDT program coordinator, administers the program through processing the TDT expenditure request for your review, manages the TDT project list update process, as well as the annual rate adjustment process. So we have a administrative role, and prepares an annual report that's available at the end of the calendar year. So the latest report covers the 23-24 fiscal year. And so expenditure requests are presented for your approval, and so that's your delegated responsibility to act upon the requests. How it comes to you, it's proposed in a memo that is prepared by your staff and or agency staff, including THPRD, for example. We review it to make sure it's consistent with the TDT project list, that the funds are, that the project is eligible for expenditure, and that they are being used accordingly. And then the TAC reviews those requests and makes a recommendation, and then ultimately your committee takes the final action to approve those requests. And all expenditures of TDT funds need to go through this process. So just a heads up for all parties. There's this accountability measure that's incorporated into the TDT program. So we do have this item before you, the annual rate adjustment. The board takes action on it and it becomes effective July 1st of each year. And here is the table illustrates the rates and some example for single family detached dwellings, apartments and townhomes. In fiscal year 2024-2025, that effective rate was $11,478 for single family. It's about $1,000 more under the annual rate adjustment for fiscal year 2025 through 2026. And in the administrative procedures, the ordinance specifies that the rate cannot increase. It's capped at 10% a year. So the methodology for how we adjust the rates is based on a calculated composite of with index using a 5-year rolling average. And so I think the next slide we detail specifically what's folded into that index. And you want to go to the next slide, Teresa? Here we go. So we have a weighted average composite cost index, which accounts for the 3 primary elements of construction. So materials weighted at 50%, labor weighted at 30%, and right-of-way at 20%. And as the chart here illustrates, the primary driver of that being the materials has experienced the most significant increase over the last 5 years, which has led to the composite weighted average resulting from this year's increase of 8.32%. Oh, sorry, it's actually a little bit, 8.32%. Followed by right-of-way, and then labor has remained relatively constant over the last 5 years. And so Julie Sosnowski, I did want to just recognize Julie's role. She's our TDT coordinator and resident expert. So if there are more specific questions, I always defer to Julie on those questions. And your staff are well aware and familiar with Julie, and she convenes regular quarterly meetings with TDT coordinators at cities, and so always direct specific questions to Julie. But I'm also happy to answer any questions for you today. And then we do have the 2 action items before you, so I can, unless there's questions, we can.
I think we can jump into it. Just thank you for that presentation. We had enough new mayors and folks on this committee. I thought it'd be worthwhile just to go over that again. And it's always good for the public listening in to kind of understand that. But if I understand it correctly, we're spending our own money. We're just approving the projects here. So, and when I say our own money, I'm talking about cities and counties. So,
correct.
Yeah. Oh, Mayor Lube, you have a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if someone can remind me what was the increase last year?
Ooh, good question.
It was roughly this, let's see, it was 8.29% last year, and it's 8.32% this year.
Got it. I I want to say I understand the reasoning why, and I totally get that costs and everything are going up. I just, on the flip side, also have concerns about us wanting to continue to have an environment that is, builder friendly. And as all of us, including municipalities, continue to raise our SDCs and other taxes and those things, that I think it just makes it a challenge, right? But on the other hand, we have to pay for things. So I wanted to vocalize the push and pull of, I get it, but man, that's a hard pill to swallow, an extra $12,000 for a single house to absorb on top of everything else. So I just wanted to share that.
It's a great point. Stephen.
Yeah, I was just going to add, because of the 5-year rolling average that's built into the ordinance methodology, it is an interesting dynamic where we actually saw during the last lengthy recession back in the early 2010s that we were still seeing pretty significant increases in the TDT rates, even though the real estate market had essentially tanked. So it tends to sometimes catch you on the sort of downside a little bit, where the rates are still coming up faster than actual current costs may be increasing. And but it also helps to temper the speed at which the rate increases in times like now, where we're seeing this rapid escalation. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword, but I certainly appreciate the comments about needing to be mindful of the cost benefit.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Why don't we move right into proving the two projects, then we'll go on to the rate adjustment.
Perfect. Thank you. We do have two expenditure requests before you for your consideration today. One by the City of Tigard for $18.8 million. This covers two projects on the project list: McDonald Street, Hall Boulevard to 99W, and 72nd Avenue or 99W to Hampton Street. Details about those projects are included in a memo in your packet. And then Washington County has submitted a request for $1.3 million for matching funds for the Council Creek Regional Trail to support corridor preservation and trail construction. County staff confirmed that both of these requests are eligible for TDT expenditure, and the WCCC TAC took action at its February 6th meeting and recommended approval of both.
All right, thank you, sir. Are there any questions? Or if there's not, I'll entertain a motion. Mayor Lou, do you have a question?
I don't have a question other than I just want to share that McDonald Street, it's a really unsafe street that kids are crossing all the time to try to get to school, and super excited for what this money is going to do. And if there's no questions, I move to approve the TDT expenditure request of $18.8 million from the City of Tigard and $1.3 million for Washington County.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the two expenditure requests say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say aye. Motion passes unanimously, if I read it right. Thank you, everybody. And then we'll move right along to the TDT rate adjustment.
Chair, so this is a non-discretionary item, so there's no actual action here. So I think I covered the majority of this in the presentation, but it is set for an 8.32% calculated index based on the index, an increase starting July 1st. So more of an FYI, but we will take this action. The board does have to act on it by May, and so we will take this before them in April for formalizing the rate increase that will become effective July 1st.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the presentation and the education on our TDT system. Really appreciate it today. With that, we will go ahead and move on to item C in our agenda, the RFFA potential bond scenarios presentation. And I believe we have Mike McCarthy here, Greg Snyder, and Dyami. I got it wrong again, didn't I? Dyami, is that right? Dyami, here to talk about that. So I'm not sure who wants to go first, but go ahead and take it away.
Mike's gonna take the lead on this, and then Greg and I can jump in as needed.
Great.
All right, well, good afternoon. My name is Mike McCarthy. I work for the City of Tualatin as the city engineer, and I represent the cities of Washington County on Metro's Transportation Policy Alternatives Committee, also known as TPAC. And then our alternate representative is Greg Snyder from Hillsborough. And then the county representatives are Dyami Valentine, who you met in the last item, and then also Jessica Pels is the alternate. So any of them, I'll do the play-by-play work, and then the others will chip in with the color commentary as they see fit. Sorry, we don't have any Super Bowl snacks for you. And I believe county staff has some of the key notes to pull up that they'd be able to share for the TPAC report. If not, I can share, particularly in the RFFA items. All right, so a couple just key quick notes at the beginning of the meeting from the chairperson, and we're going to try to provide a little more full accounting of what happened at the meeting and some better notes that we can forward to all of you for your use or consideration as you're considering these items. Started off with a note from the Metro's chairperson, Tom Kloster, that about federal funding and some of the uncertainty with that in the last few weeks. That federal funding, if your grant's already been obligated, the money's still flowing. So some of that has come through, although they're basically saying no new grant funding awards or obligations will be made while they're reviewing programs. And then there were a couple action items. One was deleting a rail safety project on the Lombard corridor up in North Portland. And then a second one involved, and this was a good news story, our region received $10 million in what they call reallocation funding. Basically, because our region has delivered above a certain percentage of projects on time, we get additional funding that basically comes back from regions that had funding taken away for not meeting timelines. So it's an additional $10 million in funding. Metro then sent out a call for projects for already federally funded projects that could use the additional money. 13 million was requested, 10 million was available. So they allocated about 80% to each project, which is a similar percentage of the request for each. But I think it reflects well on our region that we've been able to get those projects allocated. And then the next item, should I go ahead and share my screen on this one? Here we go. Okay. So thank you, Dyami, for sharing that. And these are some of our notes. The next item involved the regional flexible fund allocation bond scenarios. And Metro, again, is leading this process and is looking at anticipated federal funding that's consistently come to the region, federal formula funds and surface transportation funding. And the region decided in previous discussions saw a lot of value in getting some of these projects going more quickly. So the idea arose to issue bonds to raise, it would be about $84 million would be the maximum amount to fund projects around the region. And they've been particularly looking for projects of a regional nature that would have significant transit elements. And 10 projects were initially submitted from each of the regions, including a lot of staff work to put together applications and provide a lot of detailed information about the projects. Of those 10, Metro decided that a project at the Hillsborough Transit Center didn't meet their initial criteria. So 9 projects were advanced. And there's been more discussion, more information requested from staff. And at this point, Metro is proposing to narrow that list down to 5 projects. And those 5 projects are shown on the next page. The first 2 are bus rapid transit. So it would be bus rapid transit along 82nd Avenue. The second project would be bus rapid transit along Tualatin Valley Highway. The third one is the Sunrise Corridor Gateway Project, which parallels Highway 212 and 224 in Clackamas County. The fourth one is transit elements of the Burnside Bridge Replacement Project. And the fourth one is a streetcar extension in the Montgomery Park neighborhood of Northwest Portland. The 4 projects that Metro is proposing to no longer consider include the 185th Avenue Max Overcrossing, the Better Bus program that Metro had put forward, and then access to transit, or they call last mile improvements along Oregon 99E, McLaughlin Boulevard, and then 72nd Avenue in Tigard. And I think in your notes include some of Metro's reasons for cutting out those projects. I think there's some room for debate about those. For example, they say the 185th Max Overcrossing is comparatively not of a regional scale, and yet they're including a streetcar project in one particular neighborhood. So it'd be a fair question to raise. But of these 5 projects they're proposing to continue, they're looking at figuring out ways to allocate the money. And these represent the 8 scenarios that Metro staff put forward. With the first 4, I'm trying to balance, the 5 themes that Metro used and proposing certain dollar amounts for each of the particular projects. You can see those in the table. Washington County and Hillsborough staff have made a pretty strong case that $30 million is necessary for Tualatin Valley Highway, and any lesser amount really jeopardizes the ability of the project to move to that next phase. And then you can see some of the different scenarios towards the right, which allocate $30 million towards both of the bus rapid transit projects. We had proposed, based on input from your staff at our technical advisory committee, proposed a scenario 9, which takes the full $84 million bonding amount and splits it between the 2 bus rapid transit projects on Tualatin Valley Highway and 82nd Avenue. And Greg or Dyami, anything you'd like to add in that discussion?
Dyami, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think some of the comments that we raised, and appreciate Mike's overview. Some of the scenarios that Metro has presented here. Reflecting that these are all good projects and warrant funding through some mechanism. Not all these projects warrant funding through this mechanism necessarily, but their attempt to develop scenarios, like in these first 4 scenarios, some of the dollar amounts for some of the projects become fairly small amounts, and actually are lower than what the initial program direction was, which was to limit project request to 8 million or greater. So we noted and provided those comments to TPAC, just reflecting that some of these dollar amounts are below that threshold. But Metro staff does anticipate working with the project nominators to address what is really an appropriate threshold for those projects to advance. They acknowledge that some of these numbers were not vetted with the project nominators to determine if these were appropriate thresholds. So there's still room to work through these scenarios, and I think they may in fact present some revised scenarios to JPAC. I don't know if we got confirmation to that effect, but I think it was clear that some of these numbers were not really workable. And so one of our requests was to make sure that the funding strategies for these projects are also presented. So we just have a clear picture of how these the bond funds would contribute to the overall project. And I think as Mike noted, we each of us, including Greg, emphasize that in order for the TP Highway project to advance, we really needed to have that 30 million was the minimum amount that would allow that project to advance. So I think that's a key talking point. Greg?
Given out the Super Bowl, I was listening to both Tom Brady and Troy Aikman. I can't think of which one I would sound better at. There's a Tom or is it Troy? But I'll give you a little bit of color commentary here. I wish from a technical and staff perspective, we would have known that the 84 million was the cap a year ago. That would have really helped us. And I think that regionally, we spent a lot of time on this competition that we didn't need to. I think the second thing is that those two transit projects, the 82nd Avenue and TV Highway Transit Project, if you've reflected back this last year, there's never been a scenario where they're not in. So it's kind of funny because they're in every scenario. It's just a little bit about the money part of how much. So I would posit that those will be there in the final award. They will be there. And the third thing is that in talking with our sister cities, Forest Grove, Cornelius, Beaverton, of course, Hillsborough, and our Washington County peers, it's real clear that TV Highway project, that's an important one from our perspective. $30 million would be great. That reduces all of our local share of a $300 million project. So every dollar we can add into that transit project from a federal perspective using these funds is one less dollar we have to take out of our own wallets. And because of that, that's scenario 9, which is not reflected here, which would inure to the great benefit of Washington County and the cities along that project path. It would be the $42 million. Just take 84 million and split it in half and give 42 million to the east side, 42 million to the west side, and call it good. I think that makes sense. And I want to just echo that the numbers that you see were not for the streetcar and the Burnside Bridge and the Sunrise Corridor. They weren't vetted. So likely you won't see those numbers again in their final format. At the end of the day, it's going to come down. We'll have those two FX projects there at some amount, hopefully 30 million. And then TriMet is going to, not TriMet, Metro is really going to try to peanut butter the rest of the money to make people happy. So that's what our JPAC representative for the cities of Washington County will be faced with coming up this next Thursday. Mike?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Brady and Mr. Aikman. And a couple other key points. The $84 million bond, paying that back would cost $139 million over time. So that's one of the questions that arose. And that would be paid back essentially by reducing the remaining RFFA money for smaller projects around the region. I think the other key point is each of these 5 projects, this money would be making a significant early step towards a much larger project. So while it would be a huge boost in getting these projects moving and going, none of these 5 would offer a ribbon cutting for the amount contributed. And that's a current concern for some. And I think any other color commentary, or could be a good time for questions or comments.
Any questions for the TPAC team?
I don't have a question, but I'll say I'm glad you elevated the scenario 9 that's not reflected here, because I think that is in the best interest of Washington County jurisdictions, because while there's, 4 cities plus Washington County has some proportion of local match, if we get 84 or 82 million, it's far better than 30 million divided by. So I like that scenario is what I'm saying. So thanks for elevating that. And either way we slice and dice this, we're in a best case scenario. It's a win-win situation for Washington County.
More money is always a good thing as we move forward. I don't see any more questions. So thank you so much for that update. Do you need any guidance or direction from this group at all moving forward? Or do you think we're in a pretty good place? A letter or something like that.
Tim, I think your representative sitting at the table would like to hear what the other group have to say. It's great that we've heard the staff comment.
Yeah, that's true.
It'd be really great to see what the electeds have to say about it, because as your rep, I think Nafisa and I are aligned on probably, a 7 or a 9 option is probably a good one, where if all comes to fail, focus the bonded money on the 2 big projects, 82nd and TV Highway, and then we'll use the ongoing RFFA money to look at these other projects. So if the rest of our representatives here are in support of that, for Nafisa and I to go to bat for you on an option 7 or an option 9, it'd be good to hear from you.
Hey, everyone's speech out in Hillsborough. I'm with 7 or 9 as well.
Just from a consensus point of view, does everyone give a thumbs up or a thumbs down just to get an idea where we're at? See a lot of thumbs ups in the room. I would say 7 or 9 are the best scenarios for us as well.
Nafisa, do you need any other direction? That seems pretty clear to me that we go to bat or negotiation between the $30 and $42 million point and focus on it between the 2 projects.
Yeah, with the caveat that I need to check point with the board,
obviously,
which is preferred. But like I said earlier, it's a win-win situation for Washington County. I think we were in a different spot last time. The RFA conversation was happening, but this time I feel good walking into this conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. And thank you for that, Jeff, for getting me reoriented and back in the right place. I do appreciate that. Never hesitate. Greg.
Just one last thought is that you'll enter the conversation most likely with this sense of increased risk of our federal funding coming forward, and that we have to acknowledge that. And I think the TPRAC reps want to the Metro staff to explain to you the risks of what's happening and what could happen. But at the end of the day, the scenario 7 is lower amounts. It's the $60 million ask. It's the lowest and most conservative ask. I would consider it our safe harbor to land the ship, given the risk profile that we see. So thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to say that.
Oh, no problem, Greg. Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts, comments on this subject? Well, with that, we will go ahead and move on to item D, our regional committee updates. We're going to use this time for committee updates as we normally do, but we are going to try something new for the agenda on this by including notes from the TPAC and MPAC meetings going forward in the packet. So you guys have that before the meeting. So to help drive good conversation and discussion on topics that are coming up in both of those regional meetings. The TPAC was just last Friday, if I understand correctly. So it's a little tight, but we're going to try to, moving forward, have those notes available for this group as we go into this, as our representatives give their updates. And with that, I shouldn't have said TPAC, I meant JPAC. But anyways, Mayor Delenn, Heidi, Mayor Lube, Commissioner Fye, do you have an update for us on JPAC? We just kind of went through a long discussion.
I think he hit the biggest issue. Thank you for focusing this much agenda time on it. And that's really the big one. So we'll continue to discuss that going forward. And then the big decision will be us voting on it. I can't remember if it's this month or not. The agenda is not published. And for whatever reason, I can't download the last month's agenda from the website. But yeah, this is the key topic for us is the regional flexible funds allocation and the bonding of it. So I think that was the biggest thing we needed feedback on. Nafisa, did you have something different or Heidi?
No, I think you did it very well considering that the agenda isn't published, and I think staff raised this for me. It's not going to because the meeting is happening, so there's a timing off. But before I add my comments, Stephen, you have your hand raised. Did you have something about JPAC?
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, thank you. No, I just wanted to follow up on Chair Rosner's point about the notes from TPAC. So we actually have them drafted. We'll have them posted online in your agenda packet later this afternoon. But as you noted, we had a really quick turnaround from the TPAC meeting last Friday and today's meeting. So normally we'll include them in the packet up front.
No worries.
Mayor Delane, the transit, the 82nd Avenue Transit Project locally preferred alternative will be discussed at JPAC. And then there's the Rose Quarter MTIP amendment that we need to vote on as well. Which I assume is, yeah.
More money for Rose Quarter is the short answer on that. I already, ODOT already gave me a call and said, hey, how do you feel about this? I'm sure they called you too and said, give us the preview. So I told them it's great. More money for the Rose Quarter as soon as you show me more money for TV Highway.
That's the right way to approach it. Awesome. Anything else for JPAC? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the MPAC agenda. Same thing as I talked about with JPAC. We're going to be working on providing notes from the previous meeting. We're kind of in the opposite place here where they don't even have the agenda for the next meeting posted yet. We do have the work plan, which you all have a copy of in the agenda for this meeting. For the next meeting on the 26th, we have they're going to go over our work plan for the year, talk about the 82nd Avenue Transit Plan and future vision scoping and work plan coming up in the next meeting. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm getting my place back here. Mayor Pace, Mayor Dillon, anything you want to add on that?
I don't. No.
Awesome. Any questions on MPAC or JPAC? Seeing none, we'll move on to other business and agency updates. I don't think we have any unless someone has something they'd like to update on or tell us something amazing that's going on in their city. It looks like Stephen has something.
Chair, I was just going to point out too, I think we skipped over R1 Act. They just met.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Last week.
Yep. I missed that. R1 Act, Mayor Wenzel, Mayor Lube.
Yeah, we met last week, had a robust discussion. We got a presentation on ODOT's priority investment areas, which include the new heat maps, which was an interesting conversation. We talked about the jurisdictional or the joint transportation work groups, which was just a more robust discussion, I think, in depth on kind of what members saw. And then we had a presentation and discussion on the jurisdictional transfer committee updates and how that process is going. So those are the things that we addressed in the last meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Wenzel, Mayor Bubenek, anything to add? Heidi, was that Metro did the presentation on the heat map? Who did that presentation? I apologize.
ODOT, Amanda Peets from ODOT.
Okay. I just find it interesting. Metro's done their own project. Portland did their own project. Now it sounds like ODOT's doing their own project covering the same area. Talk about a way to save money. Just getting on my soapbox a bit. Uh, anything else on our regional meetings, R1 AC MPAC or JPAC? All right. Well, thank you for keeping me on track, Stephen. So that with that, are there any other updates from the cities? Anyone have anything fun going on we all need to know about? Otherwise, we can close out this meeting and give you a little time back. Steve or Mayor Pace.
Hey everyone, I have a couple things. The Hillsborough State of the City is going to be February 20th, Thursday. So if you're looking for something incredibly exciting to do, come on down. Also wanted to let you know that I think this is a benefit regionally. Raj Sports, who owns the Thorns and the new WNBA team, has chosen Hillsborough to put their new state-of-the-art sports facility and physical therapy facility. We're really excited about this. It's the first one of its kind to have a sports facility only focused on women. And I think it could benefit the entire region because I've already talked to some of the folks over at Raj Sports about, like, do we have students who are interested in physical therapy who could intern there, things like that. And this could benefit everyone. So I also wanted to share that when I was growing up playing soccer, we always were sent to a field 30 or 45 minutes away. The women were never allowed to play on the fields that the men were allowed to play on, ever. And many of the women's sports in my area experienced the same thing. Our uniforms were hand-me-downs from the men's team from the year prior. And they were usually given to us unwashed. And so this I think is an exceptional investment in sports and also in women's sports and in our region. And I know that my experience is not unique. The experience I just shared with you is not unique. Many women athletes have experienced the same thing. So I just wanted to mark not only the investment that they're making and the benefit that it will be to the entire region, but it's a turnaround from the way women have been treated in the past in sports. And it's a mile marker, I think. So I just wanted to share that with you all, and thanks for indulging me.
Thank you, Mayor Pace. Stephen.
Actually, I'll defer to Councilor Rosenthal.
Okay.
Well, just a couple things. First of all, of course, you've all heard that we have a new elephant at the zoo. That's a big deal. They're going to be naming it shortly, and everything is happy there. That's a wonderful thing. First time in about 12 years, I think. Secondly, the TV Highway Steering Committee is going to meet this Thursday, and hopefully that will be an approval of the locally preferred option for that going forward. So appreciate the work that was done today. Also, we have now appointed a new director for the P5, the Performance Arts Centers. Craig Stroud will be taking over that. So that's great.
Thanks, Councilor. Stephen?
Great. Yeah, I was going to mention the TV Highway Steering Committee. So thank you, Councilor. I wanted to make sure folks knew that was coming. And then I did want to just point members to your agenda packet. There's the future agenda topics list. So Jessica and I met with Chair Rosner and Vice Chair Pace last week, and we built in a few topics here and have taken a look at the Metro MPAC and JPAC work plans for the upcoming year. So we've dropped in a number of topics already, but we always want to remind folks that if you have topics that you think are of interest to this committee and fall within our sort of land use and transportation wheelhouse, feel free to let us know, and we can work with the chair and vice chair to get some topics added as they come along. And this gets updated every month, so always encourage you to just take a look at it in your packet every month too.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder on that, Stephen. And just to kind of amplify that a little bit, if you do have ideas for agenda items, please let us know, and we'll try to work those in. And then as long as they're kind of in the lane of transportation and housing, I also want to add, we talked a little bit in that meeting about making sure in areas where we have to make decisions or significant recommendations to the commissioners that we have several updates. One in the kind of the formulative stage when we're kind of working on what something's going to look like, and then updates as it moves along, so we have good impact or input, sorry, from this committee as we move forward. So that was something else that we're going to try to make sure we're doing too. Did I get that right, Stephen? Awesome. All right. Well, any other announcements from the cities or the county for that matter? Watch our Sherwood Facebook page. We're going to be lifting the first span of the 99 West Bridge here early March. Probably, I think it's going to be March 7th, which is going to be a lot of fun. We're trying to only close 99 West for like 24 hours. That's our goal, because it's the detours around it are going to be crazy while they're doing that lift. But it should be a lot of fun to watch that lift if you guys want to come out and watch. If there's nothing else, I think we can. Stephen, did you have anything else before we adjourn?
No, sir.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you to staff, and thank you to everyone that came and presented today. Really appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Well.